there's trouble, G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe against Cobra, the enemy, fighting to save the day. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe.
If you grew up in the 80s or 90s, chances are you had at least one G.I. Joe action figure lying around. Maybe it was Duke, maybe Snake Eyes, or if you were that one kid in the neighborhood, you had Baroness. And you probably kept her hidden so your mom didn't ask too many questions. And of course, you remember rushing home after school to watch G.I. Joe, a real American hero. The cartoon that made you believe every battle could be won with teamwork, laser beams, and the occasional PSA about not talking to strangers. Basically, it was America's way of saying, here's a war cartoon, but don't worry, no one actually dies. But what if I told you there's an episode of G.I. Joe so shocking, so dark, that it was actually pulled off TV? An episode that broke every single unspoken rule of Saturday morning cartoons. One that wasn't about toy sales or harmless fun anymore. It was about war. Real war. With consequences. And the craziest part? Most fans never even saw it. Some caught it during its brief airing and never forgot it. Others only heard whispers of it years later, through grainy VHS tapes, or some shady friend who swore he totally had the tape in his basement. Yeah, sure, Kyle. This wasn't the typical safe violence G.I. Joe was known for. This episode crossed the line, featuring realistic weapons, terrifying stakes, and a story that left parents fuming and networks scrambling. The kind of thing that makes you wonder, how on earth did this ever get approved in the first place? Was somebody at Hasbro asleep at the wheel? Or did they think kids could handle a little nuclear annihilation with their cereal? And before we dive into this banned episode, quick heads up, if you want to relive the classic G.I. Joe series for yourself, you can still get the full DVD collection. I dropped a link right at the top of the description. And hey, if you enjoy these deep dives into the darker side of your childhood cartoons, consider dropping a super thanks below. Every dollar helps me keep uncovering these lost, banned, and completely insane stories. And trust me, there are plenty more where this came from.
Our most dangerous enemy is not G.I. Joe, but your collective incompetence.
Now back to the question. Why was this one G.I. Joe story considered so dangerous for kids that it disappeared from reruns completely? What made it so different from every other battle between Cobra and the Joes? And how did a cartoon meant to sell toys accidentally turn into one of the darkest, most controversial war stories of the 80s? Because while G.I. Joe was supposed to be about parachutes, lasers, and nobody really getting hurt, this episode reminded kids of something much scarier. What real war actually looks like. And to really understand why this one story was so shocking, we first need to talk about how carefully G.I. Joe kept its violence under control. Because trust me, Saturday morning war was never supposed to feel this real. So what was G.I. Joe all about? Before we get into the banned episode itself, we need to rewind for a second and remember what G.I. Joe usually looked like. Because trust me, it wasn't exactly Saving Private Ryan. See, on paper, this was supposed to be a war cartoon. You've got the Joes, the elite military force, battling Cobra, a terrorist organization bent on world domination. That setup alone sounds like it should have been brutal. Gunfire, casualties, high stakes. But this was Saturday morning TV in the 80s, and the 80s had rules. And one of the biggest rules? You can't actually show kids what war looks like. So instead, the creators invented what I like to call cartoon war logic. Every weapon fired? Not bullets, nope. They were neon-colored lasers. Because apparently, laser beams don't kill people. They just make cool sound effects. Every exploding vehicle? Don't worry, that Cobra soldier was definitely wearing a parachute and landed somewhere safely off-screen. You never actually saw anyone die, ever. Every fistfight, punches thrown, maybe a little wrestling, but nothing ever left a mark.
Yo, Joe!
Home sweet home.
Duke could take 10 laser blasts to the chest and be ready to deliver a motivational speech 30 seconds later. It was war without consequences, danger without damage. And the parents loved it because they could sit their kids in front of G.I. Joe and think, well, at least no one's really getting hurt. Now, don't get me wrong. As kids, we didn't notice. We were too busy reenacting battles with our action figures. But looking back, it's hilarious how hard the show bent over backwards to sanitize violence. Like, remember how every Cobra pilot would always eject from their fighter jet just before it exploded? Every single time. Those guys had the fastest reflexes in animation history. Forget terrorists, they deserved medals for surviving that many crashes. And don't even get me started on the Cobra troopers' aim. These guys made stormtroopers look like Navy SEALs. Thousands of laser blasts flying across the screen, and the only thing that ever got destroyed was trees, walls, and the occasional Jeep. But here's the thing. That was the point. Hasbro didn't want trauma. They wanted toy sales. And you can't sell action figures if kids are crying because their favorite character just got blown to bits. The compromise was this weird, bloodless, consequence-free version of war. And for years it worked. Parents tolerated it, kids loved it, and the FCC stayed off Hasbro's back. But then came one episode where the writers decided, you know what, let's push this just a little further.
G.I. Joe, the Oktober Guard!
The three of us gotta keep them busy till the reinforcements arrive!
We'll manage!
They ditched the lasers, they ditched the parachutes, they ditched the unspoken promise that everything would be fine by the end credits. And suddenly, G.I. Joe stopped feeling like a toy commercial and started feeling like, well, a warning. A glimpse of what real combat might look like. And that's exactly why people freaked out. Because the moment you remove those safety nets, the parachutes, the laser beams, the goofy PSA at the end, you're left with something way scarier. And that's where our band episode comes in. A single story that threw all those Saturday morning rules straight out the window. So let's walk through it, scene by scene, and you'll see why this one had parents calling the network in outrage. The controversial episode breakdown. Alright, now let's dive into the real reason you clicked. The Invaders. The episode that turned G.I. Joe into something straight out of a sci-fi horror flick. This isn't your average toy-friendly war. This one is about aliens. Or at least, that's what they looked like. It starts in the desert. The Joes are tracking Cobra when the Oktober Guard, the Soviet version of G.I. Joe, shows up and the two sides start trading fire. You think it's just gonna be another turf war episode. And then, out of nowhere, the sky tears open. A massive UFO descends, blasting Cobra's base into rubble. Cobra soldiers panic, the Joes freeze, and the Russians can't believe what they're seeing. For once, everyone just stops fighting. The ship lands and a figure steps out, hovering down with beams of energy. The voice that comes next is chilling. I've come from the star Sirius. I'll judge your planet. Surrender, or Earth is doomed.
I shall speak but once. We have taken 2 specimens for examination. When we conclude our experiments, your planet will be informed of its fate.
You're watching this thinking, wait a minute, did G.I. Joe just turn into War of the Worlds? And the threats weren't vague either. The so-called alien actually says he'll destroy San Francisco and Vladivostok if Earth doesn't comply. Global stakes, real cities, real terror. This wasn't Cobra with another weather machine or some goofy hypnotic ray. This was an annihilation ultimatum. The shocking part? The alien wasn't even real. It was Cobra pulling the strings the entire time. Zartan, the master of disguise, posing as the extraterrestrial overlord, faking an invasion to push the world into panic. For a show built to sell action figures, that is a terrifyingly clever plot. A fake alien invasion staged to make Earth's two biggest superpowers collapse. And this setup forces the Joes and the Oktober Guard, normally bitter rivals, to team up. That uneasy handshake across enemy lines, soldiers from opposite sides working together because, well, either unite or watch the planet burn. It's heavy stuff. The middle stretch of the episode is like a Cold War thriller. Submarines cutting through icy waters, secret launches into Russian territory, commandos sneaking through fortified bases, while an alien ship hovers overhead. Except, of course, it wasn't really an alien ship. It was Cobra's latest trick. An elaborate masquerade designed to fool the entire world. Even Snake Eyes and Wong get captured inside what they believe is an alien craft.
They were suitably startled to learn my true identity, so we may conclude that neither G.I. Joe nor the Oktober Guard suspects the truth.
Imagine being a kid in the 80s, watching your favorite mute ninja suddenly get sucked into a UFO. At that moment, you didn't care if it was real or fake. You just knew Snake Eyes was in trouble, and the stakes had never felt higher. Eventually, the truth comes out. The alien is revealed to be Cobra in disguise. The ship is destroyed, and the doomsday scenario is narrowly avoided. But the damage is already done. The entire episode leaves you unsettled. G.I. Joe wasn't supposed to be about fake alien invasions and nuclear ultimatums. It was supposed to be laser battles and safe explosions. What sticks with you isn't the victory. It's the images of cities nearly destroyed, families almost wiped out, and the uneasy alliance between enemies who only came together because they had no choice. Do you remember watching this one? Did you think the alien was real the first time you saw it? Drop your story in the comments. I want to know if you were one of the few who saw this madness unfold when it first aired. Because for a lot of kids, The Invaders wasn't just another Saturday morning cartoon. It was the moment G.I. Joe stopped feeling like a toy commercial and started feeling like a nightmare. Part 4. Why it was pulled. So after terrifying kids and probably traumatizing a few parents, The Invaders vanished. Poof. Gone. It aired once, and then, like a Cobra operative in the night, it disappeared from reruns. And the reason why? Well, let's just say Saturday morning TV wasn't ready for this level of darkness. See, back in the 80s, cartoons were under constant fire from parents groups and watchdog organizations. These groups were already side-eyeing shows like G.I. Joe and Transformers, calling them half-hour toy commercials that brainwashed kids. And then this episode comes along, where instead of neon lasers and parachutes, you've got blood, civilians in danger, and straight-up terrorism.
This time, the situation is clear. You have invaded us, and the penalty is death.
Parents lost it. Phone calls flooded the networks. Letters poured in. Some parents claimed their kids had nightmares after watching. Others accused Hasbro of trying to desensitize children to real-world violence. And honestly, they had a point. This episode didn't feel like a toy ad anymore. It felt like a mini action movie. Now, aside from the network's perspective, this was a PR disaster. Saturday morning cartoons were supposed to be safe. They were supposed to sell toys and keep kids happy while parents had their coffee. They were not supposed to get complaints about traumatized 8-year-olds asking their mom what a nuclear warhead is. So the decision was made quickly. Cut it from reruns. In syndication, when the series was re-aired, this episode was either completely skipped or edited down so heavily it barely resembled the original story. The blood was gone, the dialogue toned down, and the scenes with civilians in danger just cut. And that's why most fans never saw it. Unless you happened to catch the original broadcast or got your hands on one of those rare VHS recordings floating around collector circles, this episode might as well have never existed. It became this weird, underground piece of G.I. Joe history, the kind of thing fans whispered about at conventions. Hey, do you remember that one episode? The one with the blood, the one they never showed again? And because this was the pre-internet era, rumors spread like wildfire. Some kids swore they saw characters die in this episode. Others claimed there were multiple banned G.I. Joe episodes. The truth was a lot simpler. One episode crossed the line, and the networks buried it. And honestly, you can't blame them.
1800 hours I shall order them to attack. And by 1900 hours, Cobra will own the White House and the Kremlin.
Imagine the network executive who had to explain this to Hasbro. Yeah, so instead of selling toys, this week's episode made parents think Cobra was about to start World War III. Probably not great for business. And here's the irony. By trying to make the story feel more real, the writers accidentally proved why the cartoon had to stay fake in the first place. Because once you show blood, once you show civilians in danger, once you bring nukes into the conversation, you can't go back to parachutes and PSAs about not talking to strangers. The illusion is shattered. The episode exposed just how fragile the safe violence formula really was. And Hasbro, being Hasbro, wasn't about to risk toy sales over artistic expression. So they scrubbed it from the record and went back to business as usual. Lasers, parachutes, goofy villains, and happy endings. But for the kids who did see it, the damage was done. This wasn't just another episode, it was burned into their memory. Because for the first time, G.I. Joe felt like it wasn't playing pretend anymore. And that's exactly why this episode still has a cult reputation decades later. Because while the networks tried to erase it, the fans never forgot. And thanks to collectors, bootlegs, and the internet, the Invaders lives on as one of the darkest chapters in G.I. Joe history. Part 5. The Legacy. Today, The Invaders is remembered less as an episode of G.I. Joe and more like a legend, a ghost story for cartoon fans. Because even though it was pulled from reruns, fans never forgot it. Those who caught the original airing swore it felt like something they weren't supposed to see. Kids traded stories about it on playgrounds. Collectors hunted for VHS tapes with the elusive recording. And once the internet came along, grainy bootlegs started popping up in fan forums and on YouTube. It became this strange badge of honor. If you'd seen The Invaders, you weren't just a casual fan. You were part of an underground club. You were one of the few who knew that, at least for one night, G.I. Joe stopped being a cartoon and accidentally turned into a war drama. And that's why the legacy of this episode is so powerful.
Duke, up there! Am I seeing things?
Yeah! You will suffer for this!
They're dogfighting!
It proved that even a show designed to sell toys could stumble into something deeper, something raw, something that actually unsettled people. Looking back, it's kind of hilarious. Hasbro wanted kids to buy action figures. Instead, they gave them an animated lesson in Cold War paranoia. Whoops. But it also shows how fragile the safe violence formula really was. One slip-up, one story that pushed too hard, and the whole thing collapsed. Because once kids saw blood, once they saw civilians in danger, once they heard talk of nuclear annihilation, they just couldn't unsee it. For a lot of kids, The Invaders was the first time a cartoon ever made them feel genuinely scared. Not the fun kind of scared you get from a monster of the week, but the real kind. The kind that makes you look over your shoulder and think, wait, could this actually happen? And that's the power of nostalgia. These shows weren't perfect. Sometimes they were cheesy. Sometimes they were just 22-minute toy commercials. But every once in a while, they gave us moments that stuck with us forever. Moments that shocked us, disturbed us, and, whether the networks liked it or not, changed the way we saw the world. So maybe The Invaders wasn't just a mistake. Maybe it was a reminder that even the safest, silliest cartoons could accidentally stumble into something real. And that's why fans still talk about it today. If you want to revisit the classic G.I. Joe episodes for yourself, don't forget, I dropped a link at the top of the description where you can grab the DVD collection. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that super thanks below. It helps me keep uncovering these lost, banned, and shocking cartoon stories for you every week. Now I want to hear from you. Did you ever see this episode when it aired? Or do you remember another cartoon that scared you way more than it should have? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one. And I might even use your comment in a future video. Because believe it or not, G.I. Joe wasn't the only cartoon to go too far. Another legendary show had an episode so disturbing, it was pulled from TV immediately. And no, it wasn't for violence this time. It was something way stranger. But that's a story for another video. But for now, we'll see you next time.